The morning sky over Kozara was the color of old bruises, purple and gray, with smoke rising like ghosts from what used to be homes. Sergeant Marcus Webb moved through the rubble with his rifle ready, though he'd seen no movement for hours. His unit had pushed through this sector 2 days ago, and he'd volunteered to sweep back through for survivors. The radio crackled with static on his shoulder, but no voices came through anymore. He was 32 years old, a career soldier from Pennsylvania who'd signed up at 18 looking for purpose and found only the machinery of war. His hands were steady, his eyes were sharp, but inside, Marcus carried a weariness that went deeper than exhaustion. He'd seen too many villages like this one. The well in the town square was still intact, incongruously pristine among the destruction. Marcus approached it carefully, checking the surrounding buildings. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the whisper of wind through broken walls. A whimper. A child's whimper. His heart hammered as he traced the sound to a collapsed house on the eastern edge of the square. The front wall had caved in, but the back rooms appeared partially intact. Marcus called out in the local language, words he'd learned phonetically. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm here to help." Silence. Then, again, that small sound of fear. He moved the debris carefully, piece by piece, aware that one wrong move could bring the rest of the structure down. His hands found the edge of a wooden door, partially buried. Behind it, in what must have been a cellar or storage room, he found her. She was perhaps 5 years old, curled in the corner on a pile of blankets, her dark hair matted with dust, her enormous brown eyes reflecting nothing but terror. She wore a small blue dress, now torn and dirty, and clutched a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. "Hey," Marcus whispered, lowering his rifle and holding up his hands. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you." She didn't move, didn't speak. Just stared at him with those haunted eyes that had already seen too much. Marcus noticed the bodies then, partially covered by a collapsed beam near the cellar entrance. A woman and a man, her parents, he assumed. They'd hidden her before the building came down. They'd saved her with their last act. He felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for too long. "What's your name?" he asked softly, sitting down slowly so he'd be less threatening. He pulled out his canteen and a protein bar from his pack, setting them between them like an offering. The girl's eyes flickered to the water. Her lips were cracked and dry. "It's okay," Marcus said. "Take it. It's yours." She moved like a small animal, quick and cautious, grabbing the canteen and drinking in desperate gulps. Marcus let her drink, then gently took it back before she made herself sick. "My name is Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. "Marcus." The girl watched him, and after a long moment, she whispered something so quietly he almost missed it. "Lina." "Lina," he repeated, and saw the smallest flicker of recognition in her eyes. "That's a beautiful name." Over the next hour, Marcus coaxed her out of the cellar. He gave her more water, more food, and wrapped her in his jacket despite the heat because she couldn't stop shaking. He searched the rest of the village as the sun climbed higher, but Lina was the only living soul left. Everyone else was gone, fled, dead, or taken. The war had consumed this place entirely. His radio remained silent. His unit had moved on, and he'd lost contact. The front lines had shifted, and he wasn't even sure which direction safety lay anymore. But as he looked at Lina, sitting among the ruins with her rabbit clutched to her chest, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. He couldn't leave her. Whatever regulations said, whatever the protocol was, he couldn't walk away from this child who had no one left in the world. "Okay, Lina," he said, kneeling down to her level. "We're going to take a trip together. I'm going to keep you safe. Do you understand?" She didn't answer, but when he held out his hand, she took it. The war had fractured the region into a patchwork of control zones, militia territories, and no man's lands. Marcus moved carefully, avoiding main roads, sticking to the forests and fields. He'd stuffed his uniform jacket into his pack and wore only his tan undershirt, trying to look less like a soldier and more like a refugee. Lina walked beside him when she could, but more often he carried her on his shoulders or in his arms. She didn't speak much those first few days. Trauma had stolen her voice, leaving only silence and those watchful eyes. But Marcus talked to her anyway, keeping up a steady stream of gentle conversation. He told her about Pennsylvania, about the mountains and the deer that would come down into his backyard. He told her about his sister Sarah, who loved to bake cookies and always burned the first batch. He told her simple stories, anything to fill the silence with something other than the distant sound of artillery. On the third day, they reached a checkpoint manned by peacekeepers from his own coalition. Marcus's commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, was a practical woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Webb," she said, her voice flat with disbelief as she saw the little girl clinging to his side. "What the hell is this?" "Sir, I found her in Kozara. She's the only survivor. I couldn't leave her." Rodriguez pulled him aside, out of Lina's earshot. "You know the protocols. We don't adopt war orphans, Webb. We process them through the proper humanitarian channels. There are organizations for this." "With respect, sir, those organizations are overwhelmed and underfunded. You know what happens to kids in those camps. They disappear into the system or worse. That's not your call to make." "It is now," Marcus said quietly, meeting her eyes. "I'm not giving her up." They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Rodriguez sighed. "You're putting me in an impossible position." "I know. But she has no one else. Your tour ends in 4 months. Then what? You take her back to the States? Immigration will have a field day with that." Marcus hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd only known that leaving her felt impossible, felt like the worst kind of betrayal. Rodriguez must have seen something in his face because her expression softened slightly. "Look, keep her with you for now. I'll document her as a civilian under temporary protective custody. But Webb, you need to figure this out. I can't protect you forever." So Lina stayed with him. She became a small shadow at the forward operating base, a child in a world of soldiers. The men and women of his unit, hardened by combat, softened around her. They brought her candy from their ration packs, taught her card games, showed her pictures of their own families back home. And slowly, gradually, Lina began to emerge from her shell. It started with small things. She learned to smile again, tentatively at first, then more freely. She learned English words, mixing them with her own language in a hybrid that only Marcus could fully understand. She followed him everywhere, her small hand always reaching for his when she was frightened or uncertain. One night, 6 weeks after he'd found her, Lina woke from a nightmare screaming. Marcus held her while she sobbed, her small body shaking with memories of things no child should ever witness. When the tears finally stopped, she looked up at him with those dark eyes and whispered in halting English, "You, stay? Not leave Lina?" Marcus's throat tightened. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise." "Promise?" she repeated, testing the word. "Promise. That means I'll keep you safe. Always." She laid her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Papa," she whispered, the word so quiet he almost missed it. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. Her real father was buried under rubble in Kozara, a man who died protecting his daughter. Marcus could never replace him, didn't want to try. But if Lina needed a father now, if that's what would help her heal, then he would be that for her. "Papa," he repeated softly. "Yeah, kiddo. I'm your papa now." The months passed, and the war ground toward its bitter conclusion. Ceasefires were negotiated and broken, negotiated again. The coalition forces began preparing for withdrawal, and Marcus's rotation home approached with the inevitability of a tidal wave. He'd tried everything. He'd contacted every humanitarian organization, every adoption agency, every legal advocate he could find. But the bureaucracy was Byzantine, and international adoption from a war zone was nearly impossible, especially for a single soldier with no permanent address back home. "You need to establish residency," one lawyer told him over a crackling video call. "You need a home inspection, character references, financial stability documentation. And that's before we even get into the international protocols. This could take years, Mr. Webb. If it happens at all." "Yes." Lina would be lost in the system by then, placed in an orphanage or foster care in a country that was still putting itself back together. He'd seen those facilities, understaffed, overwhelmed, sometimes dangerous. He couldn't do that to her. But he also couldn't take her with him. Not legally. Not without documentation she didn't have. Captain Rodriguez called him into her office 2 weeks before his rotation home. "I've been pulling strings," she said without preamble. "I got you extended orders. 6 more months, with a transfer to the peacekeeping mission here. It's not much, but it's time. Time for what, sir? Time to figure something out. Time to maybe establish residency here, apply for guardianship through the local courts. It's a long shot, Webb, but it's something. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. This only delays the problem. And Marcus, she paused, her expression serious. You need to prepare for the possibility that you can't keep her. You need to find her a good placement, a family here who can. No, Marcus said firmly. That's not happening. You can't just watch me. So he stayed. His unit rotated home without him, and Marcus transferred to a peacekeeping mission based in the capital city. He found a small apartment off base, got Lina enrolled in a local school despite the challenges. She was 7 now, growing taller, learning faster, adapting with the resilience only children possess. She called him Papa without hesitation now. She drew pictures of them together, stick figures holding hands, a tall one and a small one, always smiling. She told her teachers about her father who was a soldier, who kept her safe, who made her breakfast before school and checked her homework at night. But the paperwork remained an impossible maze. The local courts were sympathetic but slow, the adoption laws unclear in the post-war chaos. Months stretched on, and Marcus's extended orders began to run out. One evening, as they sat together in their small apartment eating dinner, Lina looked at him with those 2 old eyes and asked, "We stay together, yes, Papa?" Marcus's heart broke a little. "Yes, baby. We stay together." Promise? He'd promised before, and he'd meant it. But how could he keep this promise when everything was conspiring against them? Promise, he said anyway, because what else could he say to this child who'd already lost everything once? The orders came down with bureaucratic coldness. Sergeant Marcus Webb was being recalled to the United States. No more extensions available. 6 weeks to conclude his affairs and report to Fort Bragg for reassignment. He fought it through every channel he could find, but the military was done being flexible. He'd been given more time than most, and now his luck had run out. The worst part was telling Lina. He waited until a Saturday morning, when they had the whole day together. They went to the park near their apartment, where Lina liked to feed the ducks at the pond. She was 8 now, her English nearly fluent, her smile coming readily. She'd started to heal, to believe in safety again. "Lina, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important," Marcus said as they sat on the bench, watching the ducks glide across the water. She looked up at him, and somehow she already knew. Children who've survived trauma have an instinct for incoming loss. "You have to go," she said flatly. "Not a question." "I don't want to," Marcus said, his voice thick. "I've tried everything, baby. I've fought with everyone I can fight with. But they're making me go back to America." "I come too," she said, but there was no hope in her voice. She knew better. "I wish you could. God, I wish you could. But the paperwork. Lina, I don't have the legal right to take you. Not yet. But I'm working on it, I swear. I'm going to find a way to bring you to America, or I'm going to come back here, or—" "You leave Lina," she interrupted, her voice small and shattered. "Like Mama and Papa." "No," Marcus said urgently, pulling her close. "No, sweetheart, this is different. Your Mama and Papa didn't have a choice. I don't want to leave, and I'm going to do everything I can to come back or bring you to me. This isn't forever." But wasn't it? The realistic part of Marcus's brain knew the odds. International adoption took years under the best circumstances. These weren't the best circumstances. And Lina needed stability now, not years from now. He'd found her a placement, a good one, he told himself. A local family, the Petrovs, who'd been vetted by the humanitarian organizations. They had 2 other children, a stable home, experience with adopted children. They would care for Lina, give her the life she deserved. But Lina didn't want the Petrovs. She wanted him. The day he left, Marcus felt like he was tearing his own heart out. Lina stood at the gate of the Petrovs' home, her face pale, her eyes dry. She'd run out of tears days ago. She held her one-eared rabbit, the same one she'd been clutching when he'd found her 3 years before. "I promise I'll come back," Marcus said, kneeling in front of her. "I promise I'll find a way. Will you wait for me?" She nodded, but there was no trust in her eyes anymore. He'd broken his promise, even if it wasn't his fault. Adults always left. That's what she'd learned. I love you, Lina. You're my daughter, always. Nothing will change that. She threw herself at him then, wrapping her thin arms around his neck in a desperate grip. Papa, she sobbed. Papa, please. It took everything Marcus had to gently disentangle himself, to hand her to Mrs. Petrov's waiting arms, to walk away while she called for him. He heard her crying his name as he got into the transport vehicle, heard it echo in his mind for hours afterward. He'd failed her. Despite all his promises, all his fighting, he'd failed her in the end. Marcus returned to the States and threw himself into the adoption process with single-minded determination. He hired lawyers, filled out endless forms, made calls, sent emails. He saved every penny he could, knowing he'd need money for legal fees and travel. He wrote to Lina weekly, sending letters to the Petrov household. In the beginning, she wrote back, short notes in careful English, telling him about school and her new siblings. But as months became years, her letters grew less frequent, then stopped altogether. The lawyers gave him realistic assessments. International adoption was nearly impossible without being married, without having an established relationship with the child in her country of origin. The fact that they'd lived together for 2 years didn't matter to the bureaucracy. He'd have to prove financial stability, undergo home studies, navigate international treaties and protocols. Years, they told him. It would take years. If it was even possible. Marcus didn't give up, but life had a way of moving forward anyway. He was deployed again, to another conflict zone. Then another. The army became his entire existence because he didn't know how to do anything else. He rose to staff sergeant, then sergeant first class. He earned commendations, respect from his soldiers, but none of it felt like it mattered. At night, he looked at the photograph he'd kept, a picture of him and Lina at the park, both of them laughing at something long forgotten. She'd been 7 in that photo, gap-toothed and happy. She'd be 18 now, he realized with a shock one morning. An adult. Possibly graduated from school, possibly moved away from the Petrovs entirely. He'd lost her. The thought sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and cold. He'd saved her life in that collapsed cellar in Kozara, but in the end, he'd still lost her. Marcus was stationed at Fort Campbell, Tennessee when his whole world changed with a single unexpected email. The email address was unfamiliar, the message brief. Dear Sergeant Marcus Webb. I am looking for an American soldier named Marcus who was stationed in Kozara approximately 10 years ago. He found a girl named Lina in the ruins of a village. If you are this person, or if you know this person, please contact me at this email address. With hope. Lina Petrova. Marcus's hands shook so badly he could barely type his response. His heart hammered in his chest, and he felt dizzy with a mixture of hope and fear. After 10 years, was it really her? Lina. It's me. It's Marcus. I've been looking for you for 10 years. Where are you? Are you safe? Please write back immediately. Marcus, Papa. He hit send and then sat staring at his inbox, refreshing every few seconds like a madman. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. When the response came through, he nearly dropped his phone. Papa? I can't believe I found you. I've been searching for so long. I'm in Sarajevo now, studying at the university. The Petrovs were kind to me, but I never forgot you. I never forgot your promise. Can we talk? Can we see each other? I have so much to tell you. Lina. They arranged a video call for the next day, and Marcus barely slept that night. He paced his apartment, rehearsing what he'd say, terrifying himself with all the ways this could go wrong. What if she hated him for leaving? What if she blamed him? What if she'd only tracked him down to tell him how much he'd hurt her? When the call connected, Marcus found himself looking at a young woman who still had those same dark eyes, but everything else had changed. Lina was 18 now, her hair long and pulled back in a ponytail, her face thinner and more angular than the round-cheeked child he'd left behind. She wore a university sweatshirt and sat in what looked like a dorm room. Papa, she said, and her voice broke on the word. Lina, Marcus managed, his own voice thick with emotion. God, look at you. You're so grown up. They both started crying then, tears of relief and grief and joy all mixed together. I looked for you, she said. I've been looking for 3 years. The Petrovs didn't keep your letters, They thought it was better for me to move on. But I couldn't move on. I couldn't forget you. I tried to come back, Marcus said. I tried everything. The adoption laws, the paperwork, I couldn't make it work. But I never stopped thinking about you. I've written letters every week for 10 years, even when you stopped writing back. I didn't know, Lina said, wiping at her tears. They never told me. They thought they were helping me adjust. Are you okay? Are you happy? Lina smiled through her tears. I'm in university, Papa. Studying international law. Because I want to help other children like me, children caught between countries and bureaucracies. The Petrovs were good to me, they really were. But I never stopped missing you. You were my father when I needed one most. They talked for hours that first call, catching up on a decade of missed time. Lina told him about school, about her adoptive siblings, about the nightmares she still sometimes had of Kozara. Marcus told her about his deployments, about the photograph he'd kept, about the letters he'd written even though they were never delivered. Can I come see you? Lina asked finally. I've been saving money. I can buy a ticket to America. Marcus felt something unlock in his chest, some knot of grief he'd been carrying for 10 years. Yes, he said. Yes, God, yes. But let me pay for the ticket. Let me bring you here. You promise? She asked, and the echo of that word across the years made them both smile through their tears. I promise, Marcus said. And this time, nothing is going to stop me. Marcus stood in the International Arrivals Hall at Nashville International Airport, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone around him must be able to hear it. He'd taken leave, cleaned his apartment, bought groceries, and then cleaned his apartment again because his hands needed something to do. The flight information board showed her plane had landed. Now it was just a matter of waiting for her to clear customs and immigration, to collect her luggage, to walk through those doors. He'd almost worn his uniform, then decided against it. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, wanting her to see him as just Marcus, not Sergeant Webb. He carried a sign with her name on it even though she'd know his face. Would she? Would she recognize him? He'd aged in 10 years, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes. And then the doors opened, and there she was. Lina was pulling a wheeled suitcase, wearing jeans and a jacket that seemed too light for Tennessee in November. She scanned the crowd, and when her eyes found his, her whole face lit up with a smile that erased a decade of separation in an instant. She ran to him, abandoning her suitcase, and Marcus caught her in his arms the way he'd done 1,000 times when she was small. Except she wasn't small anymore. She was as tall as his shoulder, a young woman instead of a little girl. Papa, she said, her face pressed against his chest, and Marcus held her tight enough that he might have been hurting her but she didn't complain. I've got you, he whispered. I've got you, sweetheart. They stood like that for a long time, oblivious to the crowds flowing around them, two people who'd been separated by bureaucracy and distance and circumstances beyond their control, finally together again. That first week was strange and wonderful. They had to learn each other again, not the soldier and the traumatized child they'd been, but the people they'd become. Lina told him about her studies, about her friends at university, about the Petrov family who'd raised her with kindness even if they'd made decisions Marcus disagreed with. They were doing what they thought was best, Lina said. They thought letting me remember you would make it harder for me to settle in. They were wrong, but their intentions were good. Marcus showed her around Fort Campbell, introduced her to his fellow soldiers. He took her to Nashville, to the mountains, to all the places he'd told her about when she was small, and he'd carried her through war-torn countryside. It's like the stories you told me, she said one evening as they watched the sunset from an overlook in the Smoky Mountains. You made me see America before I ever came here. You made me believe in beautiful places when all I knew was destruction. You saved me too, you know, Marcus said quietly. Finding you, taking care of you, it gave me a purpose beyond just surviving. It reminded me what I was supposed to be fighting for. Lina leaned against his shoulder the way she had when she was small. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a worn stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. Marcus felt his throat tighten. You kept it, he said. Of course I kept it. It was all I had from before, from my first family. And it connected me to you, to my second family. I carried it all through school. The other kids teased me, but I didn't care. Marcus took the rabbit gently, turning it over in his hands. This small, worn toy had survived a war, a separation, a decade of time. It represented everything they'd been through, all the loss and love and determination to hold on. I tried to keep my promise, Marcus said. I tried so hard to bring you to America, to adopt you legally. I never stopped trying until I had to accept it wasn't going to happen. You did keep your promise, Lina said firmly. You promised to come back, and here we are. Maybe it took longer than we wanted, maybe it happened differently than we planned, but you didn't break your promise, Papa. You never gave up on me, even when I couldn't contact you. I felt that. Somehow, I always felt that. Lina stayed for 3 weeks, the length of her university break. They talked about everything, the past, the present, the future. Marcus learned that she'd always been good at languages, that she'd graduated top of her class in high school, that she'd chosen international law specifically because of her own experience. I want to help fix the system that separated us, she said. I want to help other children who get caught between countries, between laws that don't account for love. You're going to be amazing, Marcus said, and he meant it. She'd taken her trauma and turned it into purpose. She'd survived, and now she would help others survive. But the 3 weeks flew by too quickly, and soon they were back at the airport, this time for her departure. I'll come back for Christmas, Lina promised. And you'll come visit me in Sarajevo? Absolutely, Marcus said. I have leave time saved up. I'll come in the spring. They hugged at the security checkpoint, neither wanting to let go but both knowing they had to. This goodbye was different from the one 10 years ago. This one came with plans, with promises they could actually keep, with the certainty of reunion instead of the fear of permanent loss. I love you, Papa, Lina said. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. He watched her go through security, watched her turn back and wave one last time, watched until she disappeared into the crowd. Then he walked back to his truck, got in, and sat there for a long moment. He felt lighter somehow. That stone of grief he'd carried for 10 years had finally dissolved. He'd gotten his daughter back, not in the way he'd originally planned, not through adoption or legal custody, but in the way that mattered most, through love that had survived separation, through a bond that paperwork couldn't create or destroy. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his photos. There was the old picture, him and Lina at 7, both laughing. And now there were new ones, Lina at 18, standing in front of the Nashville skyline, sitting at his kitchen table, hiking in the mountains. A decade of separation, but the same smile, the same love. He'd found her in the ruins of Kozara, a child who'd lost everything. He tried to save her and ended up being saved by her in return. And now, 10 years later, they'd found each other again. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined all those years ago when he'd promised to keep her safe. But maybe it was the right ending anyway. 2 people who'd survived war and separation, who'd built a family out of necessity and forged it into something permanent through love. Marcus started the truck and headed home, already counting down the days until Christmas, when his daughter would come home again. 5 years later, Marcus stood in a different airport, this time in Sarajevo. He was retired from the army now, working as a contractor providing security training to post-conflict regions. It let him live wherever he wanted, and what he wanted was to be closer to Lina. She was graduating from law school today, and Marcus had flown in to watch her walk across that stage. She'd been offered positions at 3 different international organizations, each one focused on children's rights and international adoption law. She'd told him she was still deciding, but he knew she'd choose the one that would let her make the biggest difference. As he walked through the arrivals hall, he saw Lina waiting for him. She was 23 now, confident and poised in ways the traumatized 5-year-old could never have imagined becoming. But when she saw him, she still ran to him like she had at 5, at 15, at 18. Some things never changed. Papa, she said, hugging him tight. You made it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Marcus said. My daughter's graduating law school. This is the proudest moment of my life. One of them, Lina corrected. What about when you saved me from Kozara? Marcus shook his head. You've got that backward, sweetheart. You saved me that day. You gave me something worth fighting for. They walked to her car. She had a car now, an old but reliable sedan that she was absurdly proud of, and drove through Sarajevo toward her apartment. The city had rebuilt itself, scars still visible but healing, much like Lina herself. "I have something to show you," Lina said as they settled in her small but cheerful apartment. She pulled out a folder of legal documents. "I've been working on something for the past year, with help from some of my professors." Marcus looked at the documents, proposed reforms to international adoption law, focusing on situations like theirs, where soldiers or aid workers formed bonds with children in conflict zones. It was complex, detailed, brilliant. "I used our case as the foundation," Lina explained. "I interviewed dozens of other people in similar situations, soldiers who found children, wanted to help, and got stuck in bureaucratic nightmares. I'm proposing a new framework that prioritizes the best interest of the child while respecting international sovereignty." "Lina, this is incredible," Marcus said, reading through the proposal. "This could actually change things." "That's the idea," she said with a smile. "I'm presenting it at a conference next month. The UN is sending observers." Marcus looked at his daughter, no longer his daughter by law or blood, but his daughter by every measure that mattered, and felt overwhelming pride. She'd taken the worst day of her life and turned it into a mission to help others. She'd survived trauma and become a force for change. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Marcus said quietly. "Your first parents, the ones who hid you in that cellar and saved your life. They'd be amazed by the woman you've become." Lina's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I think about them sometimes," she said. "I wish I could remember them better. But I remember the feeling of being loved, of being protected. That memory, plus everything you gave me, that's what made me who I am." That night, after Lina's graduation ceremony, they sat together on her small balcony, looking out over the city lights. Marcus thought about that morning in Kozara, 18 years ago now. He'd been looking for survivors, and he'd found one small girl in the ruins. He'd thought he was saving her, but the truth was more complicated. They'd saved each other. "Papa," Lina said softly. "Thank you for keeping your promise." "Which one?" Marcus asked with a smile. "I made you a lot of promises." "All of them," Lina said. "You promised to keep me safe, and you did. You promised to never really leave me, and you didn't. You promised we'd stay a family, and here we are. You kept every promise that mattered." Marcus put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against him just like she had at 5, at 8, at 13, at 18. Some bonds transcend paperwork and borders and bureaucracy. Some families are formed not by blood or law, but by choice and love and promises kept against all odds. In a village destroyed by war, a soldier had found a child. In the ruins, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd both found their way home. *The end*.